Welcome to the Go Green training. This is Jonathan Wilson, your host, and today is Thursday, March 27th, 2025. So excited for today's training. We're going to get into our TPO closing process. This is going to be a two-part training. This first training is going to be the entire TPO process A to Z, all the way from why to sell TPO, mindset, all the way from, sit down at the kitchen table through closing documents and asking for referrals. So really excited to get into this today with all you on the call. We're going to be recording this, posting it live, and then also we're going to be doing a part two, like I mentioned, where we're going to be doing an actual homeowner pitch deck and a live demo, basically, of how this works in-house. But first, it's important to understand the high-level process. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will jump in. And then just take notes, save questions for the end. We will do a little bit of Q&A at the very end. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing. Okay. All right. So as we always say, create your own spring and go green. This is going to be the roadmap to how to create a long-lasting referral business. And I believe TPO, our third-party ownership solar, is the way to do that. And so let's jump right in. Here's the agenda for the training. First thing we're going to go over is SWOT analysis. We're going to go over why TPO versus ownership, pre-closing, mindsets, things to be aware of before you go into the sit, the closing process itself, setting the expectations, tying up the sale, and then asking for referrals. So first thing, SWOT analysis. Anyone who doesn't know, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so this is my perspective as a 12-year industry veteran, worked for some of the top companies, actually the top companies in the solar and battery space. And this is just my perspective. So here's some of the things to look out for and kind of what we're competing against in the marketplace right now. So biggest thing is as markets mature, right? And I say markets, we can talk about the US market, but really state by state and even jurisdiction by jurisdiction, utility by utility, there's different markets maturity, right? Maturity meaning, a life cycle of a business, all the way from conception, infancy, growth, all the way up through, mature adult. Really where we are in the solar industry as a whole, with roughly 5% adoption in the United States, is still, you could argue in toddler phase or really early development. We're not even at the fast growth or kind of mainstream adoption phases. Now, later, as we move into those kind of more mainstream adoption phases, again, market by market, places like California, Hawaii, that already are more mature as more specific markets, you start to see digital product adoption increase, where basically when trust is high and people kind of understand the product, then people need less salespeople, less commissioned people to go out and sell the product. It actually starts to reduce commission. So what happens is, you have companies like, obviously Tesla, you've got companies, Monolith, Project Solar, that their entire sales pitch is really around, kind of the anti-solar salesperson, cutting out commissions, keeping things lean. Now, although I don't think that's a huge threat at the moment, in my opinion, although it does exist, it's still a pretty small percentage of the market that will make a large purchase. Essentially that's the same price as like a car, without going in, touching, seeing, feeling, sitting with the salesperson, right? There's just a lot of people that are going to continue to do that. And then as markets mature, you are going to see, the kind of time frames, speed up on the sales process, and trust is already kind of established in that market. So another thing to be aware of is, what are the opportunities, right? And so, I always say if you're competing for a commoditized product like solar and batteries, where you can go and price shop it online and click a button and see how much it's going to cost, although people might still not, make that 30, 40, $50,000 purchase, they are still going to be aware of the pricing. And if they're aware of the pricing and they kind of know what the going rate is, and you're selling a comparable product, then you're competing on margins, right? You're competing with basically a non-commission product versus a commission product. And, personally, I don't want to play that game. And that's why, I believe solar and battery as a service is the solution to differentiate yourself in business and gain referral business, right? It's like hard to refer somebody to a 30 to $50,000 price point, because unless you have all rich friends, right? A lot of people aren't going to just want to shell out 30, 50K or borrow money and go into debt for that kind of a thing. So solar and battery as a service has been on the rise. Big companies like Sunrun, Vivint, other ones in the past have grown that PPA, power purchase agreement, or really battery agreements now, and made that service a mainstream thing. And currently in the United States, it's about half, but it's leaning more towards third-party owned solar. And so customers want this. Customers want to take control of their utility costs, but they don't necessarily want to put themselves into debt. And so here's a few points for kind of why this product is the best to sell and why if you're in the solar sales space, I always say I actually don't sell solar, right? I'll even say that to my customers. I don't sell solar. I don't really believe people should own solar. And I've adopted that mindset because couple things. One, I believe there is more of an advantage to myself as a salesperson, entrepreneur, business person that's trying to grow and scale a business. So there's some, self-interest in there. But also, too, being in the solar space for so long, I've seen a lot of things go wrong, and so we're going to talk about some of those today in the training. But here's some, kind of quick bullet points. You can earn higher commission and margin when your product is less shoppable, right? If they can go shop you against 10 other people or click a button on a website that doesn't have a commission salesperson involved and then try to grind you down on price, I really don't like competing for a few $1,000 margin on my projects. It's just not fun, right? I don't find joy in that. Also, too, getting somebody to agree to an existing solar service or solar battery service when they're already paying for a utility service, it's actually easier pill to swallow. There's less friction involved because it's essentially already what they're doing. We often say they're switching to use us as their solar, electric, or their electric utility provider. And if we can just switch electric utility providers, people don't like change. And sales, one of the things that, you realize is you want to, yeah, people take the path of least resistance. And so if you can reduce that friction and make it be a less of a change than what they're already used to, then, saying, hey, you're going to buy all this utility equipment essentially and own your power, right? And there's a whole pitch for that. That's not what this deck is going to be about. This is going to be how to sell against ownership, right? And differentiate yourself. So those are a couple thoughts there. We'll get into some mindsets here. This is really important to know before you go into any closing situation. So these are some of the things I've highlighted for myself before I go into an appointment. I always set my intentions. Some of the intentions that I set, you can set your own, but I like to try to keep it light, right? So sometimes for me, I can go really deep into the weeds. I often will say to my clients, hey, I have 3 or 4 hours of unique content with zero redundancy. And obviously, that's too much information to give you. So I want to keep it focused on specifically what's going to serve you today. And you got to keep it light. You got to keep things moving. Sales is all about movement and keeping the process moving forward. So we're going to go A to Z process, try to keep that light. Even keel, this one's key. In sales, especially, it can be an emotional thing, making a big decision. And the emotion that you have as the seller is really important. And if you're even keel and mellow and relaxed, then that's going to be transferred to the homeowner. And that's what you want. This is not a big decision. This isn't going to change their life. You're just switching their utility service over to basically provide them a cheaper price for their power. And that's it. Really simple. And if you have that mindset, you can actually shift and talk about things that are not related to solar, which is really when you get to kind of be that, Jedi level status where you can kind of use that mind trick to just not really focus as much on the sale, but really focus on the relationship and getting to know the client even deeper. And then also pace and lead. This is important. And, you've learned about this probably if you've done sales with rapport. You want to kind of match the energy of the prospect, but you also want to lead them a little bit. And what that means is, if their energy is right here, you don't want to be way up here, super high energy, or exactly where they're at either. You kind of want to be elevating their energy just a little bit above where they're at, right? So it's not out of rapport with them. We'll do that more demo in the part two of the training. Framing and trust cycles. So really the key to closing is framing. You want to be able to frame, and we're going to get this whole, closing training really goes into how to frame every part of the process. And then also something that I call trust cycles. So really establishing trust, simplified the way I train it, is you want to shorten the cycle between what you said and what you fulfilled on, or your promise, what you actually followed through with. So you're going to notice that basically the entire process of building trust and framing, it kind of starts with the end in mind and then backtrack and works through the entire process, starting with the end and forward. So you kind of tell people what's coming ahead, and then you jump back and then explain all the way up to what you just kind of framed them for. So hopefully that'll make a little more sense once I get deeper into it, but I call it trust cycles. Other keys, you want to defer decision making. I always say things like, hey, Mr. Homeowner, whenever my customers make the decision, 100% of the time, I'm not present. So today, my goal is not to have you make a decision, just to give you the information, help you with the application process, get your house site surveyed, see if you're a good fit, and then you can ultimately decide on your own whether or not this program is a good fit for you, right? You don't want them to feel like it's a decision, because people don't like making decisions. It's a stressful thing for a lot of people. That's where you get people ghosting you or trying to wiggle out of it or saying, let me think about it, or all the different objections that are common in sales. So we'll talk about how to build that in to the process, which also reduces buying pressure, makes the client feel like they aren't pressured into anything. Low pressure selling is the key. I've been, working on that basically my entire career. So this is kind of the synthesis of that. Also, buying time. So this is key as well. One of the things that I tell new people doing solar and closing, I say the key to selling solar is buying time. You want to buy yourself time, whether it's on the doorstep and you're knocking and you need to buy, another 30 seconds of their time, or whether it's in the closing process and, they're trying to rush you out, or they have plans going on, in the day, and they're, not really wanting to be sitting there at their kitchen table with the salesperson. How do you buy time throughout the process to basically do a thorough close? Because a lot of times what salespeople do is they let the client control the frame of the situation. And whenever they do that, especially the time frame, that's one of the biggest frames that we're going to talk about. When you let the client control the frame of the situation, you'll skip steps, or you'll try to consolidate, and maybe you need to give them 45 minutes worth of information, but you only give them 25 minutes worth of information. Now, as a salesperson, you do need to be flexible and be able to kind of consolidate, expand, contract your sales process when needed. And that's, kind of what differentiates the pros. But at the same time, you want to be able to effectively buy your time and control the frame of time. So that way you're able to be thorough and cover all the steps in the process. Last couple things, you want to 8 Mile your customer. If you guys have ever seen that with Eminem, right? That's a good visual. 8 Miling is where, if you remember that scene where he's going into his freestyle rap, he basically says everything that his opponent is going to say before they can say it, right? So he effectively takes away all the ammunition of his opponent. In this situation, you want to beat the customer to the closing objections. Every objection that you miss on the front end will come up on the back end. And what you don't want is for you to get all the way to the point where they're going to sign documents, and now they're asking you questions that you already should have addressed early in the sales process, right? I generally don't get questions at the close, and it's a smooth close because I addressed all of their concerns throughout the process, and that's called 8 miling. We call that in sales. And then last thing, which could be its whole training in itself, is understand customer buying profiles. I'll just say a couple quick things on this just to simplify it. There's a whole, line of thinking on this, but the simplest way to think about it is most people sell the way they like to be sold. So let me explain. Most salespeople are generally very optimistic, kind of like silver lining minded people. And so they assume that other people are that way as well. So I always say salespeople generally have the buying style where they amplify all of the benefits and positives and good potential outcomes, and they minimize any potential risk. And that's why it's easy to sell salespeople, right? Because they usually see things as glass half full. And the reality is, most clients are probably not going to buy in that way. They're actually going to do the opposite or the inverse. They're going to maximize potential risks in their mind. They're going to minimize potential benefits that they might get from the product. And so, again, if you're in the customer's shoes, the entire frame that you should be selling to them through is through that frame, right? If you want to kind of cater your pitch to the masses, you need to be playing the devil's advocate every step of the closing process and kind of speaking to the what if scenarios, okay? So these are just some mindsets, common objections. Again, we'll get into these kind of throughout the process, but some of the main ones just to have preloaded in your mind. One of the biggest ones, in fact, I would say it's the number one objection in solar is, what happens when I move, right? I often will say this to my homeowners. I'll say, hey, probably the number one reason why every single person in your neighborhood doesn't already have solar is because they're worried about what's going to happen when they move, right? And usually when I say that, clients agree immediately, like, oh yeah, that was my biggest question I was going to ask you, right? Okay, cool. I 8 miled them to their question. Now, why that's important is because if I beat them to the question, then now I'm in control of the frame and I can control the narrative around the solution to that question, right? So that's why it's important to beat them to the objection. So these are some ways to, rebut those, or not even rebut them, really just answer and resolve and move on, right? We always we call it the art of selling, agree, respond, transition, right? Art. So, you want to bring that objection up, basically say, yeah, this is exactly the concern people have. This is actually what we're going to get into today. Not all programs are transferable, right? We're going to start hinting at ownership versus solar as a service, kind of juxtaposition those two. So we'll get into that more. What happens if the company goes out of business? Do I have who do I call if I have a roof leak? These are just common objections, but I would say there's like 5 to 6 common objections, and we're going to get into those more in some role play sessions, but you want to have those 5, 6 objections, memorized off the top of your head. All these objections I've covered hundreds, if not thousands of times. And so that's key in being an effective closer is to know your script, to know your responses, and to be a master of how to respond in the right way. So let's jump in. So this is the closing process, super high level, and then it's going to kind of, envision the customer moving through the process A to Z. And then again, we're going to do a deeper dive into an actual homeowner pitch, where we'll go through what an actual closing looks like with a homeowner. So let's get into it. Step one is discovery, right? So you get to the house, you knock on the door, or you hop on the Zoom call. Obviously, first step is pretty common. You want to start to build some rapport. If you're in house, one of the reasons why I like being in house is there's such a rich environment to build rapport off of, right? Compared to a Zoom, it's a little bit harder, a little less personal. But if you're in house, let's just say I like to do a lot of these in house. You want to comment on the environment. You're just kind of looking around, noticing what's in the space, and if something that is personal or connects with you, speak to that. Right? It could be religious affiliation, sports, right? Some people say don't talk about religion, which obviously I don't go into depth, but if I see a cross, I'm like, oh, hey, cool. Do you guys go to church nearby? Oh yeah, cool. I go to this church too, or whatever, right? Just something that is not related to solar, right? And then also if I have something relevant that day that I just came from or I'm going to next, I'll kind of build that in, right? Just to kind of share just a human aspect of what I'm doing that day and maybe ask them like, hey, what do you have planned after this meeting? Like what's going on? Just this is also going to help you start framing the time. If they're like, oh, hey, actually, I have to run in 30 minutes. Okay, cool. Well, now you know that on the very front end rather than just getting into it and the homeowner is just looking down at their watch and checking the time. And you're like, what the heck? I've done that, right? So, after you get to the discovery, the key thing here is really just, if you're in house, get to the kitchen table, right? Don't let them control again the frame of kind of where the meeting takes place. I've done meetings in garages, on front porches, in, living rooms, on couches. Generally, it's not that those don't close. I've definitely closed those, but those generally don't go as well than the kitchen table. There's a lot of psychology on that, but let's just say for now, like when you're walking into the house, oh, cool. Hey, I have some stuff I need to set up. I need like some space. Do you have like a kitchen table we could sit at so I can, kind of set up here? Cool. Get to the kitchen table. And then as you're walking to the kitchen table, commenting on the environment, building some rapport, one of the things you want to do here is if you don't already have a bill, right? You probably should already have a bill, but let's just say you don't. You want to make sure you get the bill before they sit down, right? They're already in motion, they're moving. You want to kind of ask them to do something while they're in motion. Because I've had times where you sit down, you kind of start getting into the pitch, you realize, wait a second, I haven't got the bill yet. And then the customer's already kind of in their head, just sitting there with you. And it becomes kind of like a hassle to get up and go get the bill or go find it or locate where it's at. So, anyway, some tips for discovery. You want to frame the meeting. So, basically, this is the key to the entire thing, right? If you miss this part, you might have just wasted all of the next breath and words you're going to say. Framing the meeting is so important. Let's say you got the bill, you're sitting there. Cool. So basically, you're going to say, so, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, before we jump in and kind of start answering questions and going through the process, I just want to let you know what the primary objective for today is. What we really want to do is get that site survey scheduled so we can see if your home is eligible for solar or not. In order to do that, we do have an application process that we'll get into today, and then also obviously answer any questions that you might have, right? So we kind of started end in mind, site survey, worked our way back. We need an application, aka contract, right? I say application, and then we'll answer any questions, right? Those are kind of the three steps, starting with the end in mind, working backward. Cool. So before we jump into kind of the program and how it works, so after you frame that, then you go into your opening question. And this is the opening question that I use every single time on my close. So I frame it, you know, so that's the process for today. So let's go ahead and jump in. Before we get started, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, just tell me, what do you already know about solar? Have you guys looked into it before, right? And you just listen, right? Take notes if you have a notepad, and they're gonna say what they're gonna say. Hey, yeah, we've looked into it. This is your, the 10th time, or you know what, we just moved in. We were renters before. This is our first time looking into solar. Or, it could go a bunch of ways. They could even just start divulging, yeah, we were a little bit skeptical. Our friend told us about you, and that's how we're sitting down. But we've also have other friends who've had bad experiences with solar, right? It could go a bunch of different directions. And this is where you start collecting data. We say ammo, but really it's just collecting data so you understand who you're talking to, right? Read the audience. And this could have multiple follow-up questions as well. Another really big one behind, what do you already know about solar is, what are your goals with solar? Like what would be an ideal outcome for you? Like what would you want to accomplish with solar and batteries? So, that can help too. Maybe they're going to start saying, oh, yeah, we want to get an EV. We're going to put in a pool. We want to have this, right? And again, just take notes. Like these are all really important things. This whole part of the discovery, it could be fast, right? Depending on how open the person is with you and how receptive they are. It could be, you know, they could just talk for 5 minutes, which is great. Those if they start doing that, I'm like, dude, this is already a closed deal, right? It's like they're open, they're sharing, or if they're just kind of, keeping their cards close and they're just like, oh yeah, I don't really know much about it. Tell me about it, right? And they're just like a, you know, brick wall. It's like, okay, cool. So either way, obviously just jump into the problem. Okay, cool. So thanks for that information. But as we kind of move through the process, I'll ask more questions to kind of help understand what it is we can do to best serve your needs. So here's the problem, and this is key. After you kind of frame it, get the discovery part started, this is also probably the second most important part of the entire process. You want to front load the important stuff and the beginning and the end. The middle, you just stay light and keep it quick and move through it as fast as possible. So the problem, this is key. You want to go deep on the problem. So again, this could be its own training in itself. And we might even do one where we just go 30, 40 minutes into the problem, just because if you understand the depth of the problem, and the homeowner is really kind of eating it up, and you can tell like people love problems. That's what we're addicted to. That's why we watch the news, we watch all the negativity. Like it's addicting. We want to know like what's going on, right? And so the problem is key. So this is what that'll sound like. Okay, so I don't know if you've heard Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, but there's actually a really big problem with the way our power gets delivered here in the state of California or in the state of X. Have you heard anything about that? Right? And then they'll say yes, no. So basically, the California Renewable Energy Act, they passed a bill that essentially broke up the cost to deliver the power and the cost to generate the power. Now, those delivery fees to ship the power to your house, those just keep going up. We have about 100-year-old power grid that's outdated, and it costs the, utilities, Edison, it costs them money to maintain that power grid, right? Those are really high paid union jobs, as they should be. They're very, dangerous, high risk. But as those wages keep going up to maintain this outdated infrastructure, those delivery fees, they're going to keep getting passed along to you as the homeowner. And so have you noticed that before on your bill, right? This is where you start to pull up the bill and you kill the bill, as we said. You pull up the bill, you have the bill handy, and you go through some of those line items and you basically show them on the bill, okay, here's the generation fees, here's the delivery fees. You can kind of make some analogies. I like to use like Uber Eats or Postmates to say, hey, do you guys ever like order food in on one of those delivery apps? Yeah, it's usually like twice as expensive than just to go get the food yourself, right? And it's basically because you're paying for that delivery, you're tipping that person. Kind of same philosophy with your power. You're paying all this money to maintain that delivery system to ship the power to your house, right? And that's only going to keep going up. The other part of the problem here is actually solar itself, right? Now, this is where I get to explain a little bit more in depth of why the utilities don't like solar and how they see it as a threat, but also basically just logically how it works. So I say, so, solar is part of the problem. And I kind of pause, right? And they're kind of looking at me like, you know, this guy's here to sell me solar. Why would he make it the problem? But I'm like, no, the problem is, Mr. Homeowner, is that the more and more of your neighbors that switch over to solar, the utility companies are losing customers, getting less and less customers, and they still have to make a profit for their shareholders every year. So if they're losing customers, by the tens of thousands a year to solar and battery customers, where do you think they're going to make up that lost revenue? Right? They're going to be like, oh, probably charge me more. Yeah, basically they're going to charge you more, whether it's, for the wildfires that happen or even fires that are caused by the utilities, like the Eaton fires, right? Reference some local kind of challenges that the utilities had. And anytime there's a new fee or a new cost or they lose revenue, they have to make up for that and stay in business. It's actually in California, it's all regulated by the California Public Utility Commission. I don't know if you've heard of them. It sounds like it's an entity that's created for the public, but it's really just a body that serves the utility and really makes sure that the utility companies are able to stay profitable. And every single year, the utilities they do requests for what they call rate case adjustments, where they're adjusting your rates. Now, which way do you think they mostly adjust their rates, Mr. Homeowner? Up, right? They're going to adjust the rates up. It's going to become more expensive. Let me ask you, how long have you guys lived at this house, right? Maybe you've already discovered that, but let's just say you haven't. They'll say, oh, yeah, we've lived here for 10 years. Okay, cool. So in 10 years, like, have you guys noticed a change in your cost of your electricity, right? Obviously they're going to be like, yeah, for sure. So here's the actual data. This is where I start pulling out screenshots of my utility. So whatever utility you're in, you want to get evidence, 5 years back, 10 years back, and just kind of have kind of a look back where you can, again, just keep digging into the problem. I could go on about this, but this is so important. You want to make sure they understand the pain is going to be there in the past, present, and in the future, right? If they understand there's pain at all three places, they're going to start wanting to look for a solution, right? And so I'll say, so that's basically the problem. Utility rates aren't going down, they're only going up because of cost of maintaining the grid. And as more people adopt solar, it's going to put more pressure on the utilities to increase their prices to make up for those lost customers, right? Those are the two main problems. So here's the solution, right? Keep it simple. This part, super simple. It's really simple, Mr. Homeowner. If your home qualifies, we can actually generate enough power on site and store it with batteries in your house. And if your home is eligible, you'll just pay one flat rate per kilowatt hour for your electricity. That'll typically be at pretty close to what you're at now, maybe slightly less. Obviously, if we can get you some savings, that's the ultimate goal. But really, if we can just get you onto a plan where you're not having to worry about rate increases from the utility, it's considered a win, right? So you're framing what's considered a win, right? Because if their expectation is they're going to save 90% off of their power bill, right? Then when they get to the pricing, they're going to be disappointed. Oh, wait a second, I thought this, right? If you've ever had somebody say that to you, it's because you didn't pre-frame it early in the process of what is a win. So in this case, again, a win is if we can either, roughly match what you're paying monthly now, or maybe even get you a little bit of savings and have full grid independence with solar and battery storage, then that's considered a win, right? So you're telling them what's considered a win. Cool. So after we go through solution, we transition into the two ways to go solar. So basically, there's two ways you can go solar and get batteries nowadays. Obviously, you can, buy the equipment. And again, if you already know they've shopped solar before, this is a real easy kind of one-liner to say. But I'll say, yeah, obviously you've looked into it, and let's be honest, who wants to spend, 30 to $40,000 just to save a couple $100 a month? Am I right? It's like, yeah, no, that's dumb. Like, who would do that? That doesn't make any sense, right? And especially if they have possible plans of moving. Now, let's say the homeowner's like, "Oh, this is my forever house. I'm passing this down to my kids," right? And so it's like, there could be argument for ownership. I'm not going to say you can't ever sell ownership because I do as well, and sometimes it makes sense to. But for all intents and purposes, you want to pick a direction and go. You don't want to give customers options, right? And that's one of the things I see people do is they do the option close, and you don't really want to give people 4 or 5 options. They get decision fatigue. They don't know which way to go, and when they don't know which way to go, which way do they go? Nowhere. They don't make a decision. And that's what happens is most people never make the decision to go solar. Even if all the decisions are the right decision, right? We often say, hey, you could pick the wrong decision and it's still the right decision because the right decision is to fire the dang utility company and become your own source of power, right? And so but anyways, you want to kind of frame that to the client and say, hey, there's basically two ways you can get solar. You can obviously, pay cash or do a loan and buy the system. And right now, the cost to borrow money is expensive, right? Obviously, interest rates are high. We're typically seeing, 7 to 10% interest rates for most loans nowadays. That's pretty common. And so, obviously, if you wanted to buy solar, you probably already would have by now, That's another good one-liner that I use to, again, kill the loan. Right? Now, some people don't like that and they say, "Oh, well, I want to give it open, keep it options." Now, if you have indications earlier in the process that they might be a good fit for a loan, you might not say these things. But let's just assume that for most people, you're pushing them down the direction of the power purchase agreement. So I'm going to say, hey, if you guys were going to get solar and spend that 30, $40,000, you guys probably already would have done that by now. And so I'm guessing for you guys, it just doesn't make sense to spend that kind of money just to save a couple $100 a month. Is that fair to say? Right? And generally they're going to agree. Yeah, that's kind of why we've held off on it or whatever. Okay, cool. So the other way to do it is solar as a service, solar and batteries as a service. Basically, it's simple. If your home qualifies for one of our service providers, we're going to build a project that's going to hopefully offset all of your power needs, and we'll get to that in just a little bit with the design. And if we can offset all of your power needs and store enough power here on site, we're going to submit that project to one of our solar utility providers, and they're going to give us back a pre-approved rate per kilowatt hour. Now, why do I say it that way? Because it takes me out of the driver's seat of controlling what the pricing is, right? That's another reason I don't like to sell loans. The moment the customer sees a price, what goes through their head? They're like, oh, I'm going to shop. Oh, I'm gonna start looking around and seeing if I can get a better price. And oh, thanks for the information, Jonathan. That was awesome information. And I spent an hour and a half plus I drove out there, and now they're just gonna go shop me. It's like, no, I don't do business that way. You know what I mean? It's like I don't want to waste my time. So if you're a top closer and you want to become a top closer, you need to value your time and realize that if you're selling a product that can be easily shopped, you're literally taking a gun and shooting yourself in the foot. Literally. It's the dumbest. I'm sorry, I'm just getting real passionate here, but it's like, it's not a smart move to build your business on that type of a product. So, selling it as a service, it's, hey, we're going to submit this project to our solar utility providers. They're going to kick us back a rate per kilowatt hour. Hopefully, it's close to what you're paying now, or maybe slightly less. If it is, great. We'll take advantage of it, but fingers crossed. Ultimately, I'm not the one that makes the decision for you. So all the framing of that's super important. It's just like, hey, I'm not the one that makes the decision. The solar utility provider does. Fingers crossed. Hopefully they get you pre-approved at a really good rate per kilowatt hour. Cool. So now the main thing is we just need to see if your home is a good fit for this program, right? See, there's a logical flow through the process. And often you'll find when you're closing really well, the homeowner is like, lockstep with you. They're literally asking the question, okay, cool. So how do I qualify, right? If I just said that whole script, I'm leading them into the next question in the process logically, right? After I say that to them, like, hey, fingers crossed, hope you qualify. The next question is if they're actually paying attention is, well, how do I qualify? Right? And so this is where I say, okay, cool. So the next part, and this is my job. My job is really simple. I just need to see if your house is a good fit or not. So let's jump into those qualifications. So on the qualifications, this is the key thing to know there. You want to do a little bit of, I think it's Chris Voss, the hostage negotiator who wrote, I forget the book. It's something about split the difference, right? It's like, saw him speak. I think he spoke last year. I think it was Door to Door Con he spoke. Anyways, so uh, what you want to do is frame the qualifications in the negative. Why? In the past, old sales psychology said you wanted to get them to say yes. They call it the yes ladder, where you get them to say yes, 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 yes until they get to the final close, and then they say yes to buy your product. That's not effective. We found that that goes against psychology. People are inclined to actually feel more safety in their nervous system when they get to say no, right? When we're all little toddlers and little kids, what's a toddler's favorite word to say? No, right? And adults are all just little toddlers running around acting like we've got our ish together, right? And so we like to say no. It gives us a sense of power. So you frame questions to go for no. So what does that look like? So, all right, so Mr. Homeowner, we just need to see if your home is a good fit or not. The first big one, it's real obvious, is making sure your house doesn't have any roof leaks. Have you guys had any roof leaks that you're aware of? right? And they're going to say, oh, no, no, no. Or maybe they might say, yeah, right? Sometimes they'll say, yeah, they'll say, yeah, but we got it patched up or we'll get that taken care of right now. What happens is they're qualifying to you now, not you qualifying to them. So it's a status power exchange. In sales, you don't want to be, desperate or needy or have what they call commission breath because then it lowers your status. And now you're having to qualify up to them, the homeowner. Whereas what you want to be is you want to be having a valuable product, high status salesperson, and the homeowner has to qualify up to you to get what you have to offer. And one of the ways you do that, there's a kind of a whole line of thinking there, but one of the ways you do that is through making them qualified to you through negatively framed qualification questions. So again, first one is, have you guys had any roof leaks? Okay, no. Okay, good. So that might be, you might be a good fit. Obviously, we're going to have to survey your house first just to make sure that there is no issues, right? But we'll double check that and let you know the results. The second thing is somebody on the title or a spouse of somebody on the title has to have at least a 650 or better credit score. Would that be an issue for you? Oh, no, 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 it's not an issue. We've got great credit or and this time sometimes people might even lie to you, right? And be like, oh no, our credit's great, right? And they're kind of sweating, right? But again, they're qualifying to you. And this is where I'll say, with our program, since obviously, you're not taking out a loan, there is no hard credit inquiry, but they just want to make sure that you are able to pay your utilities on time. And so have you guys had any late payments or issues with your utility bill? Right. Again, now they're qualifying to you even more. I've even had people who've had they're late on their bill, but they're like, oh no, no, we're gonna get that caught up. We're gonna pay it off, and this and that. And now they're like trying to jump through hoops to get what you have to offer. Perfect. Okay, cool. Yeah, make sure that that bill's up to date. That's going to be important for sure. And then, obviously at least a 650 just to make sure you're able to pay that solar utility payment. Again, no hard inquiries are done today, but later in the process, we will request, just your last four of your social to make sure that you do have that 650 plus credit. Cool. So in the qualifications, another thing you want to do is you want to seed all of the things you're going to ask for in the actual document signing closing process itself. You do this at the qualification stage so you can, again, build that trust cycle where you tell them you're going to do something and then, 10, 15 minutes later, you do it. Now it's like, oh, well, yeah, Jonathan did say we were going to need to verify the last four of the social, so now we're going to do that. Cool, but I didn't ask for it at that point. I just told them I was going to ask for it at a later time, but pretty soon, right? And so next thing is you have to have an active bank account on file, obviously just to pay your guys' bill. Do you guys pay your utility bill now online or do you guys still do paper billing? Right? Now, why did I frame it that way? Again, everything is all framing because they're going to say, oh, yeah, I do pay my bill online. Okay, cool. It's the same as that. Remember, people don't like change. Yeah, it's the same as that. We just need a form of payment on file just to make sure that you're going to pay that bill online. If you do paper billing, it's an extra $10 a month. Most of our people, most of our clients do the online billing though. So we'll ask for that information later in the process. Cool. Other thing is no major shading or trees. Obviously, if your roof's covered in trees, it's not going to be a good fit. You're not going to produce enough power here. Walking up, I didn't notice anything huge. It looked like you might have that tree in the back. Is it, and then you just kind of start getting them to think about that, right? If they don't have any trees, usually that's a quick one. If they do have some trees, it might even open a conversation around cutting those down or trimming those back, right? And then I will say, last qualification, super important, is patience. Now, obviously, this is not a hard qualification, but this is required to work with me because this is a long process. I don't know if your friend who referred you told you, but it's typically like a 3 to 5 month process. You've probably never done a project on your home where you had to get, the utility company involved, the fire department approval for battery safety. You got a lot of different kind of people that need to get approvals and checks and balances since it is an electrical kind of upgrade to your home. And so, anyways, just wanted to let you know that it is a bit of a long process, right? Now, this is where you start to again set the frame and buy time because again, if the customer doesn't have an expectation and you don't cover that and they think, oh, this is going to be installed in a month, right? Well, now you're setting yourself up for failure. So you want to buy time. Now, also, this flows into the next part of the process, which is the next step, which is why does the process take so long? Again, logically, you kind of finish with that qualification. So why does it take 3 to 5 months, Mr. Homeowner? And then you bullet point it out. And I'll show this in my next training where I kind of go through all the bullets, but I'll just kind of rattle it off the top of my head. I'll say, so obviously today it's real simple. We're just meeting, looking at the utility bill, looking at any potential savings you might have, and seeing where the panels might go on the roof, right? So that's the frame of where we're at now. Next step's real simple. Like I mentioned, we're going to get a site survey done, check the roofing, structure, electrical, make sure that there's no major hiccups before we proceed with the next step, which is permitting. Design and permit can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks while we get all those plans back and get all the approvals on the front end. During that time, you don't pay us a dime. We're just waiting to get everything in. In fact, you don't pay us until after the system is activated. So once the system is installed, which is pretty fast, it's about a day or two, once we get those approvals from the city back, we'll reach out, we'll coordinate that with you. I'll be your primary point of contact. I will have some assistance on my team from some other, project managers as well, but I'll be your primary point of contact. So if you ever have any questions about, anyone reaching out to you, if you're not sure if they're from our company, always be on the safe side. Call me first just to make sure you're talking to the right person. And then after we get the system installed, you're kind of at the halfway point. Once it's installed, we have to get the final inspections, utility permission to operate. That can take an additional, 3 to 6 weeks, just depending on some of those other people who are involved. Again, during that time, you don't pay us anything. You still keep paying your utility company. And then once your system is activated, your next couple of billing cycles, you'll be switched on to net metering. And once you're on net metering, you'll start getting your first monthly statement for solar at that time. So it's a seamless transition, right? Now, what is net metering, right? Again, logically flows. So net metering is basically this. I kind of pull back and I say, Mr. Homeowner, one of the questions that I get all the time is how do the utility companies make money and how do we as a solar company make money off of giving you all this equipment with no upfront costs, right? And generally at this point, again, they're like, yeah, I've been thinking that since you started talking. Where does the money go, right? So first thing is real simple. The utilities do make money off of solar and batteries at different times because they do have buyback programs where if you're not utilizing that power from your home, you can sell back. There's a bunch of different programs. We'll get into the specifics of that, but essentially all you need to know is that the utility companies do benefit off of your system somewhat. On top of that, they do have a minimum connection fee. And again, know your connection fee in your area, but for ours, it's about 15 bucks a month. So I'll say, even if you don't touch the utility grid at all and you can completely generate all the power and store all the power you need, you're still going to have to pay that $15 a month connection fee. They call it a grid connection charge. So just make sure that you're aware that you will still have two bills. You're always going to have that connection fee regardless. And then you'll have your solar utility statement as well. Now, how do we make money as a solar company? Real simple. We take the tax credits, right? If you were to buy solar, that's one of the reasons why some people do choose to buy solar is they can get up to a 30% federal tax credit. Now, again, on a $30,000 system, $40,000 system, they might be looking at $8,000 to $12,000 in tax credits. And again, a lot of people, aren't even going to be able to fully utilize that. And so this is where you can kind of go a little deeper if you want on like tax credits and how they can utilize it in their tax situation. But again, that's a whole other training. So anyway, so that's how we make money is we take that tax benefit and then obviously you're still paying us as a solar utility provider every month. You're just paying us for that cheaper price per kilowatt hour for your power. And instead of you waiting 7 to 10 years to get an ROI, us as a company put out the risk and we wait the 7 to 10 years to get the ROI. Obviously, these are long-term agreements. They're actually 25-year utility agreements that stick with the property. And this is really key, right? And this is where you can get into this. Sometimes you can address it at different points, but I'll say this is really key. So, Transferability is massive, and this is kind of one of the big pitfalls of solar. You can kind of go into the pitfalls. One of the big pitfalls of solar is people ask, what happens if I sell my house, right? And so if you sell your house and you own the system outright, obviously it just comes with the house. If you have a loan, I don't care what the solar company says, and it says it is transferable. I've never seen a situation where somebody's going to buy your home, take on a mortgage, and then take on a secondary loan. They're going to make you pay off that solar, and it's most likely going to eat into the equity of your house. And it's actually going to do the opposite of what that solar sales guy told you and increase the value of your home. You're actually, in a lot of cases, going to eat into the equity of your home. And that's why I tell people just buying solar just doesn't make sense, especially if you're going to be selling the house sometime in the near future. And so with our program, it's really simple. This is, again, super important. Screenshot this frame or capture this frame, write this down. So I say, Mr. Homeowner, it's really simple. Whenever the new homeowner moves in, they're going to call the utility and activate their service. And whatever rate per kilowatt hour is associated with the solar and batteries automatically gets grandfathered in, right? And that's how it works most of the time. Now, technically on the contract, if they have below a 650 credit, which most people won't if they're buying a home and qualifying for a loan, there's a $250 credit holding fee or a deposit essentially to transfer it over. But let's just assume most cases they're not going to do that. It just automatically transfers over. It's a one-page transfer. And then sometimes they'll say, but what if the new homeowner doesn't want it? What if the buyer doesn't want solar? And there's two or three ways to answer this, but I'll just say, hey, bottom line, if they don't want it, they're not going to look at your house, kind of like a swimming pool. If they don't want a house with a pool and you have a pool, then sorry, they're just going to filter out your house. Kind of the same way with solar. And this is the key part. I say, well, it's not that they don't want to save money on their electric bill, it's that they don't want to pay for your solar, right? Notice how I kind of flipped it and I said, hey, it's actually not that they don't want to save money on their power bill, right? Because again, when people see a house, I'm controlling the frame here. When people see a house that has solar on it, they automatically think, hey, that's a lower electric bill. That's pretty widely understood, right? Just assumptive. So it's pretty widely understood that they're not the problem is it's just they don't want to pay for your solar system, right? And usually when you say that, they agree, oh yeah, who would want to pay for your solar system that you signed up for? Exactly. And that's what's so cool about this program. Power purchase agreements, there's no debt attached to the property. There's just what's called an equipment lien, which is basically just a public filing with the county saying that we own the equipment on the house. It's our utility equipment, and you're buying electricity from us as your electric utility provider on the house. So the new buyer moves in, calls the utility company, automatically grandfathers in that cheaper rate. Super simple to transfer. Cool. Again, when you're addressing an objection, the art of closing is agree, respond, transition. Once you respond with that, you move. You don't pause, you don't let them think, but what if, but what if, but what if? It'll just never end. You'll just be in a loop. Cool. So the other pitfalls to solar is true up bills. Basically, there's a couple reasons this can happen. One, you're working with a company that is not sizing the system, is not familiar with system design. I've been doing this for a while, blah, blah, blah. You can start to build into your personal story, your history, kind of some of that stuff of why you're the expert. But really, it's just about system sizing, making sure you're dialing it in, not just for today's power needs, but your future needs. And then also you talk about customer service. Another big pitfall to solar is customer service. Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, there's two types of businesses that exist in solar. Those that have terrible customer service and those that are bankrupt. Right. And that's what I tell my homeowners, and people are like, that's crazy. Why would you say that? And I'm like, because it's true. I've been doing this a long time. And unfortunately, solar doesn't have a great reputation. Now, if you have any issues with your system, call me first. I'll help be your liaison to, interface with the solar company to make sure we get the problem solved in a timely manner. Now, why I do that, Mr. Homeowner, is really simple. If I do a great job for you, not only today, but tomorrow as well, then you're going to want to refer me to all your friends and family. Is that fair? Right? Now you're weaving in the referral into that as well. So, and it's like, hey, I want to be your service provider. for a long time, not just here to make a sale. Obviously, that's not really what this is about. This is just about providing a long-term service that you feel comfortable and confident to refer me to your friends and family, right? So super important framing. Last one is it took too long. I'll tell homeowners again, I'll say, hey, I know I've already said this a few times, but I just want to reiterate this because it is, we're going into April, right? And this is a 3 to 5 month process. Now you're going to start getting these summer bills, right? Always frame and contextualize the season that you're selling in. And we're going to move into the summer. We may or may not have this system active by summer. I just want to set that expectation now because what happens is all my clients that I sign up in the springtime, they start calling me in the summer when they're getting these six, seven, $800 bills saying, when's this thing going to be turned on? And they start, I'm like, I told you up front, right? It's a 3 to 5 month process, right? Other reason this is important too is whenever there's some negativity built in, it actually increases trust. People have this weird predisposition to believe negative news than they do to actually believe positive news. It's kind of a protection biological mechanism. So you want to make sure you hit that. Also, too, when you cover the downsides or the pitfalls of solar, what is it going to do? It's going to make them not feel like they have to go looking for reviews or research you online. Because if you just give them a bunch of really good information, if you've ever been in a close and a homeowner says to you, well, this sounds too good to be true, and you lost. That's a terrible, you're not a good closer. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's like someone telling you, oh, hey, Jonathan, you're a great salesperson, but, right, they never move forward, right? When they're trying to butter you up, it's because, you lost the sale, right? Sorry, try again. So if you want to be an expert closer, you need to understand the psychology of making them qualified to you and framing things in a negative way to set expectations low, right? One of the worst things you can do in business and sales is set high expectations and not meet them. Cool. So after you go over the pitfalls, now you're moving through the close. This next part, we're going to try to do it quick. We're already a little over time, but we go into presenting price. So after I cover all this stuff, I haven't even shown them price yet. Cool. Let's jump in. I pull up the proposal, and this is where we actually will do the demo on the next training. And we jump into the actual proposal and go over company story. So these are companies I've worked for in the past. This is why I love this company. They're great because they offer industry-leading equipment at excellent pricing and allow me to pass that maximized savings on to you as the homeowner. So that's one of the reasons why I love working with this company, blah, 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 right? And then you can talk a little more about yourself. I've been doing this for X number of years, and I love my job. I get to help people make a difference on their utilities and actually, put them into a better position. And so, you know, frame some of that in there, and then you just get into passing price. Now, with passing price, I think it's important at this point in the process, you're probably 30 to 40 minutes deep. And if you've covered everything well, you should know which direction you're moving. As a closer, if you don't know which direction you're selling by this point in the sale, then you didn't listen, right? You talked too much, right? You didn't ask enough questions throughout this process. But you should know. And again, if you're kind of asking questions, but also tilting them towards TPO or power purchase agreement, then you're going to just go straight into that and you're going to offer them one option, not two or three options. You're going to offer one option. Now, with what I typically offer is a 2.9 escalator PPA. Now, you could offer a 3.5, you could offer a zero escalator, you could offer a bunch of different things. Bottom line is just pick one, right? It doesn't necessarily matter a ton which one you pick, but usually I like to do the one that has the best monthly payment, right? The most savings up front, the easiest to swallow monthly, right? So if you do a 2.9 or a 3.5, those are the best. So pick one of those. That's the one you sell. Perfect. And then whenever you get to the framing of the rate increase, this is important. So you pass the price, you say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, great news. We got you pre-approved today at 28 and a half cents. I like to do the half cent because it seems more, I don't know, legit for some reason. I'm not sure why, but I like the half cent personally. So I'll say it's 28.5 cents, and the rate is actually capped at 2.9% per year. This is probably the best part of the program. So obviously we talked about your utility company. They've gone up, 10, 12% year over year for the past 5 years. And with this, you're actually capped. Your rate can't increase faster than 2.9% a year. So let me show you how that works. So I'll pull up my calculator on my phone. I'll type in 28.5. I multiply it by 1.029, and it basically just adds 2.9% compounding each year. And I hit equals, equals, equals. And I show if it starts at 28.5 cents, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, equal, 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 and I'll hit that and I'll catch up until I get to their average rate. So I have already shown them and broken down their average rate per kilowatt hour, which is a part of the kill the bill, and it's kind of the whole demo of how the sale works. But let's say their average rate's 39 cents, which is what it is in my utility. I'll hit equal, 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 and then okay, by year 11, we catch up to where you're at today. Mrs. Homeowner, how do you think, what do you think the rates are going to be 11 years from now? Right. And then they're going to say, oh, yeah, a lot higher. Yeah, exactly. In 11 years from now, you're going to catch up to what you're paying today. So, this is why people love the program is because everybody I signed up 5 years ago with the PPA that had that 2.9, they're actually saving more money today than when I first met them. Right. This is important that they get this because if it's framed positively like that, then it's not a concern. But if you don't frame it that way, which a lot of people don't, they just say, oh, here's a PPA and it's got an escalator, and they kind of like dance around it, then they're gonna, a customer's gonna be like, yeah, you know what? This sounds great, Jonathan, but I just don't like that escalator. I think we're just gonna wait and see, and you lost again. So it's like, you have to frame that cool once you do move, right? Cool. You framed it. Cool. So the next part's really simple. We just need to see if your house is eligible or not. So we'll go ahead and start the application process. We're going to go over DocuSign, go over some documents today. Just to be absolutely clear, this doesn't obligate either you or our company to fulfill any work on your property, but it does give you all of the terms to review over the next 2 to 3 weeks while we survey the house and see if you're eligible. So over these next 2, 3 weeks, read through these documents we're going to cover today. Today, I'm just going to give you bullet points of some of the main things that are important to know. We've already covered a lot of it, but I'll kind of give you a few other bullet points and questions people sometimes have. And then we'll sign that off today saying that, hey, we're applications in, we'll get you pre-approved. And then in about 2 to 3 weeks from now, once we get those site survey results, I'll reach back out to you and you can go over any other questions you have before we make a final decision to move forward. Cool. What did I do? I reduced buying pressure and I deferred decision making into the future. And sometimes when you do that, you're going to start moving and the customer's going to try to stop you and they're going to say, but wait, like for sure, we're not signing up today, right? Right. They're going to say that. But wait, like Jonathan, like we need to think about this, and they're going to just get serious and they're going to try to take control and be like, oh yeah, cool. You just keep composed. Oh, 100%, Mr. Homeowner. I get it. 100% of my clients make this decision when I'm not present. And that's not what I'm here to do today, is to have you make a decision, right? Do some Jedi mind tricks here. That's not why I'm here. These aren't the droids you're looking for, right? It's like, and when you do that, it reduces. Now, sometimes you'll still get 2 or 3 more pushbacks. They're signing, they're like, geez, I'm like 40 signatures in, in California, especially, there's a ton of signatures. And like, are you sure? And they're kind of like still a little bit. Again, energy is everything here. This is where even keel and assumptiveness is the most important in the entire process. Also, you want to kind of distract their attention away from it if you can while you're getting into the document. So you're assumptive, you go into the qualification. Okay, cool. So I just need to verify some info. Is this your phone number, the best phone number for you? Okay, cool. Is this your best email? Okay, cool. All right, I need your date of birth. What's that? Okay, last four of your social, boom, boom, boom. And then you're just going. And then you just start just talking about other stuff. Oh, cool. So you said you're going to your son's baseball game later. Oh, you said, you start distracting their attention onto what's happening next. Like it's happening, they're in it, they're already in motion. Now there's no more resistance. And it's just you just go at this point and you're talking about other stuff. Cool, I need this from you. Do. You're on your computer clicking away. Okay, cool. So the first thing I just sent to you, right, is the CPUC. And then I have these bullet points memorized. And we'll go through this on the closing training even more when we actually do the demo of it, but have those bullet points memorized. So these are the things that, the CPUC guide is about. They just want to make sure that you're aware of the different finance options, which we did cover, loans, leases, power purchase agreements, right? And just kind of bullet point those things and then just be like, yeah, just go through, click that for me, and then let me know once you're done. And then you just start again, distract, talk about something else. So they're going to sign. Are they going to read through everything? No. I mean, these things are like 40, 50 pages. Like that's crazy amount of stuff to read. And if they start to get a little pressure, you can see in their body language that they're getting a little anxious. Just remind them, hey, you're going to have copies of everything that we go over today, and you'll have ample time over the next 2 to 3 weeks to review those in depth. But I've already covered all the main stuff that you would want to know about, right? And you should have, right? You should have covered all those main points. Now, sometimes you'll get people come back later. Oh, I read through it and I had this question, but the truth is most people aren't going to read these things fully, and it's not that you don't want them to. I encourage people to do it, but human nature, people get busy, lazy, distracted, whatever. They're not going to do it. And that's fine. But as long as they have the bullets, so have the bullet points of that, have the bullet points of your contract. We need to have right of access to, work on the system, data sharing disclosure. You're on the title of the home, battery optimization services, so we can get you into future battery optimization programs. Like, have those handful of things bulleted out and then sign. And they're just sign, click, 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 click. Cool. And then last thing, we just need to verify a form of payment on file, like I mentioned before, right? Like I mentioned before, we just need that account and routing number for like a good checking account. Go ahead and grab that for me. And it's just you're telling them, hey, this is what I need. It's not a question. Hey, like, it's just assertive, assumptive, done. Get it? Cool. All right, let's see. Last thing, verification process, and walk them through that. Set the expectation. We're just going to go over this many these questions. They're yes, no questions, little cheat sheet. The answers are all, yes, except for the last one is a no or whatever. Just know what the answers are in your head. And then say, hey, once this verification's done, we'll schedule your survey. Cool, get the verification done. Last thing you do, and then we're done here, is you schedule the site survey. So set the expectation. Hey, it's a 45-minute survey. Our survey team, however it works for your company, but our survey team is going to be reaching out to you in the next couple days to confirm a date to come out. When they do arrive on site, they are going to need to come into the house, check a few appliances, pop up in the attic, take some pictures, make sure the structure's good, make sure you don't have any dry rot, mold, termite damage, right? Have that stuff memorized. Have you guys had any issues with that? Again, negatively framed. No. Okay, cool. So if you haven't had any of those issues, probably won't be a concern, but obviously we just need to do our checks and balances, make sure everything is good. They're going to check the electrical outside. They're going to take some pictures of the roof, maybe fly a drone over, do some of that. So it'll be about 45, 60 minutes. And then after that's all done, it's about a week or two for our design team to review everything and give you that final offer. So hopefully it works out. Fingers crossed. It would be a great program. I'm sure you're going to love it. Anyways, we're all set for today. Oh yeah, one last thing. I know we didn't have a lot of time, and I'll let you go. I know you had that thing to run to, but we do have that awesome referral program. I know you were referred to me, so let me just explain how that works. So, since you were referred to me, the way our program works is your friend Susan, who referred you, she's getting $1,000. Just full disclosure, it's $1,000. It's pretty cool. But also because you got referred as a part of our referral program, you actually get a $500 rebate, and that comes to you via check a couple weeks after installation of the equipment. So look out for that as well if you do end up getting fully through installation. And then also too, we'll talk about this at a later date. First, let's see if you qualify, right? Do a little takeaway. Let's see if you qualify. But if you do qualify, we have that same referral plan available for you as well. So we can talk about some maybe friends or family or people you might know that could benefit as well. So anyways, hopefully this was helpful. Thank you for your time, and we'll let you know about the next steps. Something like that, right? Tie it up, wrap it up, tie it down. Cool. And that's it. So that is the referral closing process A to Z. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.